Have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot! Artest looking, gets it to Bryant. Bryant turning, has to put it up for the buzzer. Banks it! Oh! He banks it!
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scotty Talks NBA. Of course, I am here with a very special guest as always, but you guys may know him from Turf Talk. He is also my co-host on Turf Talk every Sunday and Thursday, but he's here to talk some Sixers talk with me tonight. My man, Dylan Davis. How are you doing tonight, Dylan?
Let's just get a round of applause for the cast today, Scotty. It works. It works. The soundboard works. I'm just joking around, but I'm doing good, man. I'm glad that we can get Scotty Talks NBA back on track because there's a lot to talk about with the Sixers team. So, yeah, I'm chilling. Faithful Fanatics will be back tomorrow night at 5, but outside of that, it's strictly basketball kind of night.
I love it. I love it. And, yeah, it's really only basketball on the plate tonight, which is a little weird. Given last week's, NFL action that was featured on Tuesdays, as weird as that sounds. So it's only NBA tonight. So we're going to lock in on a lot of Sixers talk, obviously. We'll get into Wizards versus Sixers. We'll talk a little bit about Embiid's recent resurgence. He's back up, playing to that MVP level once again this season. And then we'll talk a little bit about, Allen Iverson and Embiid, their effect on Philadelphia, the sport of basketball in the city of Philadelphia, the brotherly love. What can Embiid do in his career to kind of, maybe not surpass, but maybe just reach that level, that status of Allen Iverson in the city of Philadelphia? We're going to talk a lot about that. And then we'll get into tonight's game, obviously. Toronto Raptors versus the Philadelphia 76ers. We'll preview that game. But before we get started, of course, we got to do a little bit of housekeeping. Make sure you're following DSM Media on all platforms. That's streaming platforms, social media platforms, and that includes Twitter. Make sure to follow us at DSM_media. From there, you can find our link tree right in the profile. It's linked right there in the bio. You click on that, you're going to find our Instagram, TikTok. We're getting more busy on TikTok, so you definitely want to follow us there. Twitch. You'll find our merch site, on TeePublic. Got a lot of merch out, so definitely support us over there. And then, of course, you'll find our YouTube link, amongst other things such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, that type of stuff. So make sure you follow us on all platforms. We got you covered. Every day of the week, we got content coming out, so you're going to want to stay tuned. Dylan, let's jump right into this Sixers Wizards recap and just that matchup from Sunday evening there. It was a pretty good game for the Sixers there coming out that night against the Wizards. Obviously, they were able to win 117-96. It's their first comfortable win in a while. It felt like it felt like they've been scraping and clawing back into games. Every game has been down the tight down the stretch, coming down to the last few possessions. Seems like we finally got a little bit of a breath of fresh air. Didn't have to stress out so much towards the end of the game. Saw some of those end of bench guys come in towards the end of the game as well. Got our first glimpse of Jaden Springer. Dylan, just immediate takeaways from this game. Anything you got for me?
Well, Sunday night was a night where the Sixers finally didn't play down to their opponent. It was a night where Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris knew they were the two best players in the building, and they acted like it, right? And they acted like it from the opening jump, Scotty. So that was encouraging to see, because obviously when we get to the Sixers, up and down roller coaster of a season segment, those two guys are going to be focusing primarily on. But yeah, those two showing their dominance. Tobias had 23 and 7 rebounds. Joel with 36 and 13. Just seeing that spark of energy against a depleted team on the road. Obviously, Joel gets into it with Trez. That was good to see because it's nights like these, it's teams like these where Joel's body language and face kind of tell the story and set the tone for this team. And normally it's a not so good thing for the 76ers. But in terms of Sunday night against Washington, both of them definitely showed up in a big way. And that was the main reason that the Sixers won that game.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on there. Obviously, it was another dominant performance by Embiid, 36 points, 13 rebounds, 12 for 17 from the field. That's the biggest thing for me. He's shooting a lot more efficiently than he has been, early on in the season. And we'll get into, obviously, his resurgence, his efficiency uptick. But Harris also, as you mentioned, 23 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 10 for 16. Also an efficient night for Harris, getting to his spots. Didn't take any threes. I do want to see him continue to be quick on the trigger at the three-point line. I think that's going to be the key to really just maximizing, that Tobias and Embiid duo. He's got to shoot more three-pointers. And I don't want him to be, strictly a three-point shooter. I'm not saying that because Tobias is his best when he's driving downhill, getting to the rim for sure. But I do want to see him continue to take those open threes as he gets those. We saw Maxey get into the mix. He's continuing to look better with Joel Embiid. I think that's something else to notate. He looks a lot more comfortable. 5 for 11 from the field, 4 assists, 13 points. That was a pretty solid game from him. And then something else I wanted to point out, regarding this game, just box score peeping, right? Korkmaz finally gets out of that funk. And that was something that was really starting to stick out. Just due to, Korkmaz's sort of resurgence at the beginning of the season. He was really hot to start off, and then he just went to the complete polar opposite. We talk about cold, but I mean, this man, it was frozen. It was ridiculous. His shooting percentages over that last month or so. And he comes out, gets 14 points, 4 rebounds, 5 for 9 from the field, 2 for 6 from 3-point. Which is huge because, obviously they're missing a few key bench pieces there with Shake Milton and Andre Drummond. So we're going to need as many points as we can get from these guys on that bench unit. But you mentioned the Montrezl Harrell, little skirmish there, and I did catch that, which, Embiid didn't really do anything. It's actually hilarious, but I think that was a little bit of frustration, overflowing for the Washington Wizards. Montrezl Harrell obviously has a lot of pride, but they did not stand a chance against Joel Embiid. They have literally nothing for him. I know Hachimura and Beal were out. KCP was out. Big deal. They're not stopping Joel Embiid. So I don't even really see where they would. Obviously Beal has an effect on the game. I'm not saying that. But as far as, me looking at a matchup between the Wizards and, kind of seeing the Wizards get off to that hot start to the season, they're kind of coming back down to earth now. And specifically looking at this matchup head-to-head, the Wizards do not scare me at all. And I will be surprised if they make the playoffs. I know people were hyping them up. And, that's kind of what we got to bring back down to earth in this game, I thought, even though they were missing Beal. But as we look forward for the Sixers, you mentioned just not playing down to your competition, and as we kind of look back on the last few games, it has been an up and down season for the Sixers. What has been the issue in your eyes as far as the inconsistent play?
So obviously attention goes to Doc Rivers and the coaching staff because that's where it goes to in every professional sport. If your team doesn't show up, if your team doesn't look ready to play, right, they play down the competition, that could be a lack of preparation, that could be overlooking a team, and a lot of times that falls back onto the head coach. So Doc gets a chunk of the blame here in terms of this up and down type of year, where they beat the Wizards. They beat the Warriors, they beat Boston shorthanded. They beat the Hawks shorthanded on the road, but then they lose to the depleted Hawks and they lose to KD and 4 rookies. Yeah. So, and I'm sure we'll get into some of those games, but it comes down to Doc. But to me, it comes down to the players, Scotty, and the leadership in the locker room. And that's Joel Embiid and that's Tobias Harris. I mentioned it earlier. I love Joel Embiid. He is my favorite Philadelphia athlete at the moment. He's one of my favorite all-time Philadelphia athletes in general. He's amazing. He's so incredibly talented. And, the sky's the limit for this dude. but there are far too many occasions, far too many nights where, like I said, his facial expressions, his body language is just not in the game.
Yeah.
He looks disinterested. And we've been talking about this for years now, Scotty. It's been a problem here now and then. And it's on you, dude. Like, you are the most dominant player. You are the most dominant man on a floor any given night when you want to be. And you're telling me you can't beat the Atlanta Hawks when they have John Collins and Bogdanovich as their two best players because everyone else is out. You're telling me you can't beat Patty Mills and Kevin Durant with 18 rookies coming off the bench for them. Like, that's on you. So, Doc, yes, but the basketball is more so on the players than any other sport to me. And it's on you. And then it also falls on Tobias Harris a little bit because I know you can say what you want about the contract. You know, he was given a contract and maybe that probably that he shouldn't have gotten. That's not his fault. That's the Sixers' fault. But in nights where Joel Embiid's not on the floor and you're playing a team that you're still better than and you can't carry your own weight, you score 12 points on poor shooting. Like, those two guys have to lead the way against these lesser talented teams. And so far, they just haven't.
Yeah, I don't think I could say it better than what you just did right there. And, you know, there's a few very specific games that you can look back to. You pointed to a few of them. But it just looks like they're not there, right? Like in this season, I don't understand that because they came out so hot to start the season, you know, a big win streak. They were really vibing, you know, positive vibes all around the team, all around the organization. And they kind of built this chemistry built off of, you know, let's get through this Ben Simmons situation. And then all of a sudden it's like, you know, guys go out with COVID and they just lost that whole chemistry that they had built there. And now it's like we're trying to rebuild it. But it's been a struggle to watch, to say the least, because I think what is concerning, you know, when you look at the Sixers is that we just continue to see like the inconsistencies that we've seen before. I think that's like what is concerning the most. Like with Doc Rivers, it's, you know, we've talked about the lineups before. We've talked about the bench units, subbing them in and out, full bench units, not staggering your stars from the first unit with some of your bench guys to just keep it level out there. And he continues to do it, right? It's like beating your head against the wall. And then, you know, Tobias, when we talk about Tobias, and I think he does receive a lot of unfair criticism, which
100%.
I guess it's a good time to go ahead and shout him out on here because he did. He went ahead. He fulfilled. I love it. We're throwing down some new production up here at DSM Media. I'm loving it right now.
Shit.
I'm loving it, bro. But definitely want to shout out Tobias Harris because you know, I took it to Twitter. I had a jersey that I'd ordered of Tobias's, the Spectrum jersey. Ordered it. It got shipped to the wrong house, delivered. It was sold out by the time, obviously, I wanted to order it again or get it resent. Took it to Twitter. Tobias, you know, DMs me straight up, says, "Hey, man, I'll hook it up for you." And about a month later, boom, the jersey arrives at my door. He hits me up. He said it's sent. So it was awesome that he reached out to me directly. I didn't have to, you know, really reach out to him. And just creating that connection with fans, like it's amazing that he was willing to do that, and even to just sit there and back and forth with me. You know, it wasn't just one message of me and Tobias talking. I actually got to talk to him a little bit, so it was awesome to have that back and forth with Tobias. But even more awesome for him to ship that jersey out. And you know, when I'm thinking about Tobias Harris, and obviously I have a niche for Tobias Harris at this point, right? Like this man,
right? You got a little special place. A special place in your heart.
A special place in my Philadelphia heart for Tobias Harris. And but you know, at the same time, I can keep it real as possible. So when I'm looking at Tobias Harris, I think there's a lot of unfair criticism that comes in. You know, at the end of the day, he signed a contract, like you said, Dylan. Would you turn down a max contract? I don't think so. So I'm not blaming him for the money that's been spent. That's not my problem anymore. Does he disappear at times? That's my thing. You know,
100%.
I would love to see the consistency throughout 4 quarters. I think that is really what holds Tobias back, and I think part of it is a mental thing because he has the skills, right? He can shoot from anywhere on the court. He has extended the 3-point range at this point in his career. But a lot of the times it just seems, even similar to Joel, like their drive isn't on that game or that quarter, and they'll go missing for a full quarter or a full half. And then that's when the crazy talk starts coming out, right? The crazy criticism. And when I try to bring it back down to earth, Tobias Harris has a game like this against the Wizards where he's very consistent, very efficient, very decisive with the basketball. And that's the key for Tobias, is being decisive, knowing what he's going to do. Like I said, he's great downhill going to the rim. Do that more often to get in a rhythm. Like, if you're not hitting mid-range jumpers, get to the rack. And I think too often Tobias Harris settles as, the lesser of the, if he's going head-to-head with guys, it's almost like he settles as the lesser. And I think he does have the skills and the talent to be the dominating presence. When we talk about going against second and third guys on other Eastern Conference teams, I think he has the talent to do that, to go out and drop 20 a night. But it's just about that drive, that motive, and keeping it consistent every single night.
So a few things when it comes to Toby, right? I'm 100% on the same page with you. He gets way too much unfair criticism, and it's not just criticism, okay? It's some people get disrespectful on social media, and they're tough guys on social media that would never say a word to an athlete or Tobias Harris if they saw him out anywhere else. Like, you just don't act like that. It's not a fake persona, right? You can criticize on social media, you can criticize on a podcast. You and I do it all the time, right? But there's a certain level that you just can't. There's name calling that you don't get to that. There's certain things you don't say that a lot of people say to him. I'm sure his DMs are filled with some lovely comments from certain people in the Philadelphia area. So that's part one. My thing with Toby is he hit such a high last year as that third leg for the Sixers, right? It was Ben and Joel and Tobias in the regular season, and he should have been an all-star in the regular season. He averaged over 20 a game, and he closed games for the Sixers at the time, right? Yeah. This year, you've seen a drop-off, especially, I think he misses Ben. I'm not going to lie to you. I think Tobias Harris's play misses Ben Simmons a little bit, right? But I'm not asking him, Scotty, when I say it's on Tobias and Joel to beat these lesser talented teams or nights that Joel's out, I understand that the Sixers are shorthanded in Utah. Tobias Harris is not going to walk into Utah and drop 35 points and carry the Sixers to a win. If he's playing the Celtics by himself, I get all that, right? But when Joel's out, and, I'd have to go back and find a game, but when you play like the Grizzlies, where you play the Kings and Joel's out, I need you to be the best player on the floor, because you can be against one of those teams. And when you struggle shooting, or you're not aggressive, or you're turning the ball over and you just don't look interested that night, then I have a problem with that performance from Tobias Harris. I'm not asking him to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders and beat a team they had no business beating. But to the level of competition they're playing, you cannot play down to them. I don't care if Joel Embiid is a late scratch, if he's out due to illness or whatever it is. Tobias Harris needs to show up that night. And so far this year, he hasn't, which is why I think with the Washington game was an important step, hopefully, for him and Joel. Because, Scotty, it seems like all year this season, it's been one step forward, two steps back with this Sixers team. Can this be the game? Both of them showed up on the road, didn't play down the competition, asserted themselves early, dominated. Can this propel the Sixers in the right direction now? They've been floating around this 500 mark for a long time. And they're even without Ben Simmons, they're a much better team than 17 and 16. Yeah. They should have probably 4 to 6 more wins this season. Yeah. 4 to 5 more wins.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, we'll get into this after, the Embiid segment, but, just looking back at December, there's so many regrets, I feel like, for the Sixers team. But we'll get into that in a little while here. Before we move on, to the Sixers struggles in December and kind of looking at the schedule coming up, I do want to just take a look at Embiid's, recent stretch here. So I do have a tweet here. Filled with statistics, right? By our wonderful guy here, Harrison Grimm, on Twitter at Harrison_Grimm. Always putting out great tweets and fun-filled stats out there. But this recent one caught my eye, and it's just based on the recent stretch by Joel Embiid compared to the front end of this season for Joel Embiid, where he was I refuse to say he was struggling, averaging 22 and 10, but he wasn't up to his usual
Joel Embiid
performance.
standards, that's struggling for sure.
Yes, that's fair to say. So, you look at those first 12 games of the season, 22 points per game, 11 rebounds, 4 assists. So he's been doing the passing game. He's been strong in that all season. But the shooting splits is where the big difference comes in. And you see the 40.7% field goal percentage. That's not very typical for Joel Embiid. Definitely one of the lowest in his career. And then you look at the 75.4% free throw percentage, which is also very low for the amount of free throws that Joel Embiid gets every night. So then, you look at his last 10 games, 34.9 minutes per game, 29.7 points per game. So he's increased his point uptick about 7 points there. Still sitting at the 11 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal per game, 1 block. But the 51.1% field goal percentage is the biggest thing for me. And then I do believe he is sitting at the 87.7% free throw percentage right now. I know you can't see it on the graphic there. What have you seen in Embiid's recent performance that kind of has you feeling good about Embiid going forward? But also just seems to be, what has triggered his resurgence here back up to that MVP level or caliber of play?
Man, I don't know. It's nothing in his game has changed, right? So early on in the season, those first 12 numbers you could look at, and you could argue the COVID fatigue, the shooting struggles that he alluded to a lot with the new ball, because he wasn't shooting well the first, dozen games of this season. So you can factor all that in. I think it definitely played a little bit of a role. Also health, obviously. But again, Scotty, it's when this dude is engaged, when he wants to dominate, he flat out dominates anything in his path. It's not a matter of how. It's not a matter of what changed. It's a matter of when he wants to be the most dominant player on the floor. Now, I don't mean to come off as, Shaq and them when they criticize him on TNT halftime, and because he's not in the post enough and he's not dunking the ball enough and he's not doing this, right? But just in terms of being fully engaged and I don't know. You just see it on his face, and it's like, this is not the Joel Embiid that I need to dominate tonight. So again, he's healthier now, I think. He's got his shooting touch back. He's got his rhythm back. And again, figuring things out with Maxey is also another thing.
Yeah.
They haven't played a lot of games with Maxey starting point guard together, figuring out spacing and everything like that. But I just think it's not a matter of what changed, how it changed. It's a matter of when it changed, and when Joel Embiid wants to dominate, he dominates. The numbers will show that to you.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on here, because there's, if you actually watch the games, and I know you do, so you don't see much difference in his game, right? Like, his game is going to be his game. He's never going to be full-time down in the post. He's going to move around a lot on offense, and really hovers in that mid-range area of the court. But, it seems like there's a lot that has kind of, weighed in on Embiid's performance this year. And I don't think it was ever taken into account. And you mentioned a few of those obstacles for Embiid, but, just as far as getting used to the new NBA ball, I know you mentioned that. We talked about Tobias kind of, adjusting or, maybe struggling a little bit without Ben Simmons. Joel Embiid may be struggling a little bit without Ben Simmons, taking up a lot of those responsibilities, especially defensively, and even the uptick in the revolvement of the offense being facilitated by Embiid. So adjusting to life without Ben Simmons. I know we all clown Ben Simmons. We all, criticize Ben Simmons to hell and back over this offseason, but there are things that he brings to the table that these guys are missing right now. We know that. We can see that with a plain eye. You mentioned it, getting in better shape. I think Embiid's getting in better shape. On those nights after a long game, it goes down to the wire, and then you have to come out, maybe even a night later and play again. it's those games that show me where Embiid is at, because his energy was low. You could see it in games like Miami, right? I think that's one that we kind of hovered over there, but that was Gabe Vincent and
right,
Duncan
Scott. That's
Robinson.
my point, Scotty. Like,
you know what I mean? Like,
and I want to get to Gabe's
energy?
comment in a second because he's 100% correct. But that's my point. Like, no matter how fatigued Joel Embiid is, no matter whatever, you don't lose that game. You don't lose to 100%. Duncan Robinson, Kyle Lowry, and the Toon Squad.
You can't.
Like, no.
You can't.
On your home floor.
You can't. And, that was one of those games where it's, once in a blue moon, you're going to see Embiid, score under 20 points. And, Miami is one of those teams that can develop a defensive scheme to do that. It just sucks that it's so simple as a zone that can, stump this team to hell and back. And, that's what we ultimately saw. We saw Embiid get disengaged. Now, I don't know if that was the zone, if that was fatigue. It's hard to say, but he definitely looks a lot more engaged now. But we just need to see it consistently every single night. And that's going to be the difference for this team. But, it's been frustrating to watch at times. You mentioned like the one game I think of specifically, aside from the ones where we're facing undermanned teams, but like Memphis, Memphis is that one team in the NBA. They got like a bunch of young athletic guys that are very defensively sound. They're physical. And it seems like every single night they're feeling like underdogs. They're hungry, and they will go out there no matter who's on the court. They have a chance that they're going to win that game because they play fundamentally sound and they play with energy. And then you watch the Sixers go up against them, and I get it. Embiid, I don't think Embiid was in that game. I believe he was out. And
that's one of the games I'm talking about with Tobias Harris.
One of those Tobias stinkers, right? Like, so that was a game where we watched Jaren Jackson like kind of dominate Tobias Harris in that game, where we need Tobias Harris to step up and be that number one. So just the inconsistency all around from this team, but it is good to see Embiid get back on track. With the last few games, he has started to become more efficient, more consistent. Now we just need the team to catch up, and start bringing it, which we did see that in this recent game with Tobias. So that was good to see him follow along. But it is definitely nice to have Embiid, back at that MVP level. You just hope that he stays there. And that's kind of where I'll leave that segment. But we'll stay on the Embiid topic here, because Embiid did accomplish something that one other Sixer has accomplished in franchise history, and that is yeah, I gotta catch on to the timing, because that was the perfect moment. So I will start to learn that.
And just so everyone knows, you're going to hear a sound here and there that has nothing to do with, doesn't correlate, because I'm getting used to all these buttons over here. So I'm going to hit one button, thinking it's a laugh or something, and it's going to be we'll figure it out.
Yeah, Gent chimes in here. Best part of the last 12 games is his numbers are higher and his defensive numbers are still top 2 as a center. Yeah, you cannot match with Embiid, and I think that's what they miss most when Embiid's out, is the defensive presence. As much as he brings on offense, they cannot stop anything on defense, especially inside when they don't have him. But definitely love to see those defensive numbers staying alive.
Right.
We move on, right? So I mentioned it, Embiid becomes the second player in franchise history, Sixers franchise history, to hit that 7,000th career point in 300 games. Under 300 games, I should say, because he did hit it at 282 career games, which was actually lower than Allen Iverson, which sparked my thoughts on, just Allen Iverson, the culture, the personality that he brought to Philadelphia as far as in the basketball world, and kind of his staple that he's let, live on in Philadelphia, and how that compares to Embiid, because Embiid, he's not maybe as flashy as Allen Iverson. He doesn't, have, I don't know. He had that big ass chain on last year. So I may be wrong. So, he has the personality. He is very much, turned himself into the superstar in Philadelphia. You mentioned he's your favorite player of all Philadelphia sports. he's the best player. Well,
Right.
Bryce Harper will have an argument, but
yeah,
he's the best player in Philadelphia sports, in my opinion, right now. And I'm wondering how does he reach that Allen Iverson's legend status in Philadelphia? Has his personality already left an imprint in history with the process? He's always going to be remembered, right? Like, what does he have to do to reach that status of Allen Iverson in Philadelphia?
Man, I don't know if Joel will ever catch up to AI in this city. Now there's somewhat of a nostalgia effect compared to the in now moment. Like, we just kind of take for granted the greatness that Joel Embiid puts out on the floor every night. And years from now, when Joel Embiid isn't a 76er anymore, we'll look back and be like, damn, like that was dominant basketball. But for reasons like you mentioned, Scotty, like AI changed the game culturally. Like he changed the game for a generation of kids, for an era of people. They wanted the cornrows, they wanted the sneakers, that they wanted to be like AI. If it was, I want to be like Mike, then AI came along, right?
Yeah.
What's interesting about the comparison here is, on a basketball floor, I think it's interesting how one guy is an undersized guard, who took a beating every night and just did things that a person his size shouldn't be able to do on a basketball floor. And the other is a 7-foot, 285-pound monster who does things on a basketball floor that people his size shouldn't be able to do. This is going to sound kind of cliche, but I think the only way for Joel to catch Allen Iverson in this city, as far as like stardom or, favoritism goes, is if he can bring this city a championship. The one thing that Allen Iverson wasn't able to do. Yeah, exactly. The one thing Allen Iverson wasn't able to do, unfortunately, was accomplish and win an NBA championship. He got there once with a lot less help and won a game against Shaq and Kobe. But if Joel can win a chip or chips, then I think maybe, just because the city is starving for one so desperately.
Yeah.
But when you change, not just this, you didn't change the game just for
city.
people in the city.
Yeah.
You changed the game internationally for people growing up. So that's very hard to leapfrog. But Joel Embiid, you did say one thing. He's already left his imprint. So he'll always be on that list with AI in terms of athletes and Sixers players in this city. But passing him, I think winning would be the only thing that he could do, because the personality's already there.
And it's a tough conversation, and I think it's obvious that Allen Iverson is pretty far ahead.
Scotty.
What the hell? What is going on, man? Okay.
Are we good?
I guess I have no idea what just happened there. I'm so sorry about
I don't either. Now, all of Gint's comments are going on my screen now.
Yeah, this is so weird, man. I'm not sure what the heck is happening.
And we're back.
All right, let's get back to what we were talking about here. And I'm totally off track now. But I believe we were talking on Embiid here still. We're talking about Allen Iverson and Embiid. Um, just looking back on AI and kind of, aside from their actual resumes, accolades wise, I do think it will require Embiid to win a championship in order to surpass Iverson
Yeah.
as far as a legend um, you know, in Philadelphia 76ers basketball history. But also, when I look at it, it is also perspective. It's all based on perspective as well, because you're going to have some old timers tell you that it's the city of Dr. J, right? Like then you'll have some old people tell you it's Moses Malone, or
It's
it's
Will.
Charles Barkley, or it's Wilt Chamberlain, or so it does go on when you have such a historic background of NBA basketball. But what I want to ask you, Dylan, and it's really based around this whole conversation. When you look back, when you get older, what are you going to call your era? Your era of basketball. Is it going to be the Iverson that you grew up on? Or is it going to be those, later teen years, early 20s of
Yeah.
Embiid in the process?
The process and Joel Embiid, I think, is definitely our era. I mean, we grew up early stages of, our lives with Allen Iverson, but AI was really that finals run. I was 3 years old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
It feels like a dream.
and he was there, a few more years after that. So, but like I was extremely young, for Allen Iverson, and then when did he come back around? Um,
So he left in 2006 is when he left Philly. And then I want to say 2009 sticking in my head, but
maybe.
I feel like that's
But
too soon. It was right after he left Memphis.
Right. Regardless, at least you're a few years older than me. At least for me, that's like technically my childhood, but that's
Yeah.
very early stages of my childhood. Watching basketball like a damn lifestyle almost. Watching sports like a lifestyle. My, middle school, high school, early 20s, late 20s, that's my era of basketball, right? So
Yeah.
it'll be Joel Embiid. It will not be remembered as Allen Iverson. That's why I said, it's a nostalgia effect in the moment too. We have one guy who, you look back on his greatness and you look back on him and you miss it in the moment. And maybe we're overlooking what Joel Embiid's doing right now. A few years down the line, we're going to be missing, 10, 15 years down the line, we're going to be thinking back on what Joel Embiid did.
Yeah, I do agree with you. And I think it's something to notate how hard it is to really compare these guys. And not compare them directly based on statistics or anything like that, but just from the perspective of a guard versus a big man or a center, especially in this day and age where big men had been starting to become obsolete in the NBA, the typical big man. And, you had these superstar big men like Joel Embiid, like Nikola Jokic, who have came into the league very young now, and they have kind of rejuvenated the center position, which I'm happy to see. I'm happy to see Embiid thriving. I'm happy to see him in this upper echelon of NBA talent. Because it's funny, I was listening to Bill Simmons' podcast today, which don't ask me why I was, but he was talking about Embiid and the performance against the Boston Celtics. I've been seeing a bunch of people talking about this specific episode. And basically what Bill Simmons was saying, he mentioned it and he made it really clear for me. So I appreciate this. Embiid is in that upper echelon of NBA players. And I'm not just talking about, superstars or, all-star level players like that. Just complete players when they're locked in, when they're healthy. There is literally absolutely no way that you can stop them. There is no defensive measure that you can put on the court. There's no amount of double teams, triple teams that you can put on this guy that's going to stop that specific shot. And I'm talking about that mid-range step back, off 1 foot at 7'2", like you mentioned. It's completely unstoppable. And Embiid is one of maybe 5 or 6 guys in the NBA that has this at their disposal. And that is something that, you hit it right on the head. We can't not recognize this. And I think we do a pretty good job of, throwing out as much, what would you call it? Throwing out as much positive vibes about Joel Embiid and his career as we possibly can. As much appraisal as we possibly can. Because constantly when I'm watching the Sixers, I find myself saying, oh my God, I can't believe he can do this. Every single game, and we've seen it, but then he does it again, or he does it better, or he does a windmill dunk on a fast break, right? Like, I've never seen this from a guy this size before. I've never seen this skill from a guy this size before. And I hate to say it. I feel like we need to. Yeah, no. I hate to say it, I feel like we need to appreciate him more.
Yeah.
Like, that part of the fan base that's talking about trade and get as much as you can.
That's so
get out of here. That is so stupid.
Are you kidding me?
Oh my goodness, man. But yes, it isn't too close yet. There's a lot to accomplish in order to surpass Iverson in this city, but especially even the NBA as false culture influence. But Embiid is doing probably about as good as you can in the city of Philadelphia right now, as far as fitting into this city and just becoming a totally dominating player. But I just want to highlight Allen Iverson's career accolades, just for anybody that might have forgot how dominant Allen Iverson really was. And these are all while he was on the Sixers. This isn't the rest of his career or anything like that. So obviously he had the MVP in 2001. So he's a one-time NBA MVP. He's 11-time All-Star, 2-time All-Star NBA MVP, 3-time All-NBA first team, 3-time All-NBA second team, All-NBA third team, NBA Rookie of the Year, NBA All-Rookie first team, 4-time scoring champion, and 3-time NBA steals leader. And that was all. That was all in a 10-year span here in Philadelphia from 1996 to 2006. So definitely just want to show some appreciation to Allen Iverson on the show here, because we don't talk about him as enough as we should. And we don't point to history maybe as much as we should.
No, and the Sixers don't treat him like that. The Sixers don't treat him as such either. Like, I've heard rumors, and I've heard people in Philly Sports Talk Radio just tell stories or say what they hear throughout the organization, that like he at times wants to be more a part. He wants to help, and he's just like not that he's not welcome in the building, but like he's, they don't care.
It's like they don't respect his basketball mind, and that's just really weird when you
think. Hold on,
retired his jersey, right?
Don't you think Allen Iverson at the very least would be a nice recruiting tool?
Easily. Imagine if Allen Iverson got, and maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't know what type of connections they build outside of the organization, but what would Allen Iverson do if he got his hands on Tyrese Maxey and could teach him some of the stuff that he did throughout his career? I mean, you talk about influence, recruiting. It could help in so many ways, and I definitely think they even owe it to him, right? Like, they owe it to him to give him a shot in some type of position within the organization. I would love to see Allen Iverson back a part of the Sixers, but we do have to move on here as we get ready to get into the Sixers and Raptors tonight. Just want to take a quick peek at the upcoming schedule, and then, of course, the current standings in the Eastern Conference here. So as we look at the next 10 games, we look at where we are in the Eastern Conference. We're 6th seed right now, tied with the Wizards at 17 and 16. Obviously, we have that tiebreaker right now. Got the Raptors tonight. We'll get into that game. Then, of course, we got the Nets on Thursday. Down the line, then it gets into a little bit of, some easier opponents, I should say. We get the Rockets, you get the Magic, 2 teams at the bottom of the NBA right now. You get the Spurs, then you get the Hornets, Celtics, Heat, Wizards, and Magic. So as we look at these next few games, we start to think about the Sixers and where we would like to see them get to, as far as in the Eastern Conference, maybe by that halfway mark in the season. how can they turn this around, or maybe not even say turn it around, but build some consistency over the next few games, specifically getting this win tonight, and then, looking on into the future, how do they continue to build some consistency here?
I look at these next 10 games, and the number that comes to mind is 7. I'm looking at the schedule, and 7-3 is so reasonable. Now if you can play higher than my expectations, 8 wins in the next 10 is definitely feasible, but you have to beat the Raptors tonight. I know we'll get into that game in a few minutes, but the Hornets, the Rockets, the Magic twice, the Wizards again, the Spurs all need to be wins. And then, with the Heat and the Celtics and Nets, who knows, right? So 7-3 is the number that comes to mind. And why I point out those teams is it sets a standard. It's stop playing down to the level of competition, Scotty. Look at the Sixers record right now in that 6th seed, right?
Yep.
Where were they at this point last year? Right around where the Bulls are, right? That 21-10, right? That kind of record, okay? Because they beat the teams they were supposed to beat. They didn't play down to their competition. Are the Sixers a better team right now than they at this point in the season than they were last year? No, they're a better team with Ben Simmons.
Yeah.
But when I'm looking at the losses that we've talked about 900 times this episode, you cannot lose those games. So those games on your right, Scotty, tonight with the Raptors, the Hornets, the Wizards, the Magic twice, you cannot lose those games.
Cannot.
Period. So
100%.
set the standard for the rest of the season going forward. Wipe your hands clean. You had a nice dominating win on the road against the team that you should have whooped. You did that. Congratulations. Continue to build off of that. If you lose to the Nets on Thursday, am I going to be upset? No. If you lose to the Heat, if they have Bam and Jimmy and everybody fully healthy, or you lose to the Celtics again in a tight game, is it going to hurt? Yeah. But you need to take care of business against the teams you should definitely beat. I'm tired of seeing them just lay a dud against a opponent that has no business being on the same floor as these dudes.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. And, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind for me is there's no excuses now, right? Like, we are where we are now. Like, obviously Drummond, Milton, who else is out tonight? Danny Green. So Danny Green's a bigger piece, I guess you could say. Milton's been solid off the bench. Drummond's been solid off the bench. You can still beat teams without these guys. Like, you shouldn't need them to win. Like, I know there's a ton of undermanned teams in the NBA this season. As long as you have Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Seth Curry, Tyrese Maxey, these are your top 4 scorers here. As long as you have those 4 guys, you should be in every game, and you should be winning most of them. If the Sixers are who we think they are, right? And, we talked about this earlier before the season started. Without Ben Simmons, anywhere from that 3 to 6 range, maybe the 5 to 6. I don't think they're that low when they're really clicking on all cylinders. I think they're closer to that 2 to 4 range. Mm-hmm. So when you look at where they should be in the Eastern Conference right now, it's very clear why they're not where they should be. Because they've dropped a game to the Atlanta Hawks without Trae Young, without Clint Capella.
Without everybody, bro.
Without everybody. Kevin Horner. Like, we could go down the list. There's up to 10 people that were missing from that team. Losing to the Boston Celtics, which I get it. They had Jaylen Brown. They had Jason Tatum, in that first matchup in December. You still shouldn't lose that game. You shouldn't be scoring under 90 points in an NBA game, like, against the Boston Celtics. Are not that good. So dropping games to the Celtics, dropped the game to the Pacers. Lesser teams dropped a couple games to the Knicks. That can't happen. And that's got to be the change in this upcoming schedule that you see here. Like you said, Dylan, you said 7-3 out of these next 10 games.
Minimum.
Minimum. Because I'm looking.
That's without giving you the 3, better team. That's without beating the Nets, Heat, or Celtics. That's just assuming those 3 are losses.
Right.
If you can overachieve and take one of those three, you should be 8-2.
Which I'm with you. I think they should be able to. The only team I would put on there, I see on there that are better than the Sixers are the Brooklyn Nets.
Mm-hmm.
And, as we get closer to these games, we'll see the players that start to, fluctuate back into the game, coming off COVID protocols. But once we get to the Celtics, they have Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. There's no excuses there. I don't want to hear that. We get to the Heat. They get Jimmy Butler back, Bam Adebayo. And that's a home game. I don't want to hear that. You know what I mean? So we have to get those games. If we lose to the Nets, I get that. Obviously, the Nets are the Nets. They're championship contenders. They're ready right now. But it is a game I would like to see them, maybe get. I would like to see them swing that game. When you're talking about a Nets team that we've lost the first two matchups up against the Nets this season. Yeah. And, one matchup without Kyrie or James Harden in it, amongst other role players as well. And, it's one of those games that they once again blew, with guys out. So you gotta turn it around. You got to start getting some wins in the division. When we look at the Raptors, we look at the Nets, the Knicks as well. We got to start getting wins against these teams. It's going to be huge when it comes to seeding down the stretch. So I'm with you. And it kind of sparks, right into this next topic. We're going to talk about the Sixers versus Raptors tonight. And, just what this game means and what it's going to take for the Sixers to pull off 2 wins in a row, which they have not pulled off 2 wins in a row since they had won 3 in a row. I believe it was 2 games at Charlotte and a game against Atlanta, I believe, that they had won, back in towards the beginning of December, I believe. So,
yeah,
it's been a while since they've gotten, 2 wins in a row, built some consistency as we've been preaching this entire show. What's it going to take against the Raptors tonight, Dylan? What are some keys to this game? It shouldn't be much, but what are you looking at here?
Well, this is an absolute must-win for all the reasons I've said throughout the show. You cannot continue to keep dropping these games to these COVID-ridden teams. They're missing everybody. I know Siakam and Gary Trent Jr. are supposed to play tonight. They're missing everybody else besides that. Okay, you need to take care of business, Scotty. I'm going to go out and say this: there are no keys to this game. You just win this game. They have no one. You're the better team. Are you missing a couple bench players? Yes, but you have Joel Embiid, you have Tobias Harris, Tyrese Maxey, Seth Curry, everybody's favorite child, Matisse Thybulle. You go out, you win this game. If there's one key that I can throw to you, it's that you put them away early. You do not let this team hang around into the late third quarter. Do not give this team any life. Don't give them even a glimmer of hope, a glimmer of a thought that they can win this game. They should not be on the same floor as you. Go out, Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris, assert yourselves early, just like you did in Washington, and knock them out in the first half. And that's that. This game is a must win. It's a should win. And there is no, the Sixers need to do this tonight. No, the Sixers are 1,000 times better than this COVID-ridden Toronto Raptors team tonight. And if they lose, Scotty, that's a slap in the face.
It's going to get me every time for a while there, man. But no.
I don't even know what half these buttons do yet. I'm going to be pressing random-ass buttons soon.
You're spot on there with the assessment for tonight. There is no assessment. You go out there, you play basketball, and you be better than the Raptors. That's what it comes down to. It's pretty simple. And, one thing to be clear about when we're talking about these games is, we're talking about teams that are dealing with COVID, right? Like teams without their stars. You mentioned they're missing a ton of guys. I'll be specific. It's OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, their rookie phenom, Fred VanVleet, the 76er killer, right? Like that dude is annoying to play against. He's not playing tonight. Mind you, he had 32 against the Sixers in that last matchup that they faced off in. And that was, I want to also mention that they were without Siakam and a few guys in that game. Mm-hmm. That was a game the Sixers should have won. I believe it was in Philly as well.
In the record book as well.
That's another one that you dropped that you just shouldn't. This is a 14-16 team. I think the Raptors are closer to what they actually are record-wise than the Sixers are to what they should be record-wise. And the Sixers need to go out there and simply prove that tonight. The Raptors are on a 3-game home win streak. That does not matter. I don't care about that. The home win streak probably happened when they had guys available. And then, of course, we mentioned the letdown last game, 115-109, the last time they faced on November 12th. So big game from Maxey in that game. He had 33 in that matchup on the 12th. So I'm looking to see if Maxey can kind of continue that heat streak against the Raptors. But regardless, I want to see a pretty convincing W tonight. I want to see us pull together that 2-win-in-a-row streak, finally get some consistency going here, and build some momentum going into the Brooklyn Nets game. Because if you lose this game, now the Brooklyn Nets game feels like a must-win, right? Like, we got to get this one to get back on track, or we're now under 500, right? Like, so get this game tonight, get 2 games ahead of 500, then you go into Brooklyn on Thursday, and there's not much pressure there. You just go and you play basketball, you go out there and compete, and you see what you can do. Let's build some momentum here. And that's, I feel like it's very simple, like you said. There's not much else to say about this. Joel Embiid's out there, Tobias Harris. We talked about both of these guys earlier. You go out there and you perform up to your capabilities. Just their averages tonight should beat the Toronto Raptors. It shouldn't take anything extra. And, the hot starts. Sixers deserve to get off to a hot start every once in a while. Stop punishing yourself by having to scrape back against these teams that just simply should not even be in the game with you. And we've seen it so many times where they get down, and I'm wondering who the guy is going to be tonight for the Toronto Raptors, right? Because once you get down by double digits, if it's like 10-point, lead for the Raptors, now you got to climb back into the game. And every time you get it down to 5 points or 4 points, boom, Gary Trent Jr. hits a 3. And it just keeps happening throughout the game. And then all of a sudden you're in the fourth quarter and you're realizing this is another blown game. So I'm with you, Dylan. I want to see a strong start tonight. I want to see them get after it early, shut this Raptors team down. Do not even let them get any type of momentum in this game. And obviously come away with the W, get 2 straight here. As we look at this game tonight, who's going to be your player of the game? Who do you think has the best night of nights for the 76ers tonight?
I'm going to go with this is a Seth Curry type of game.
Okay.
I think Joel and Tobias will get theirs. Like, I think Tobias, I don't think they won't have to play as many minutes tonight. I think Joel and Tobias will be in that 26-minute range, the 28-minute range tonight. I think Joel will give you around 20, right, in 26, 27 minutes. I think Toby will give you like 16, 17. But I think Curry, he struggled a little bit shooting from the field. Last game, I think he only had, 11 points?
11, yeah. 3 for 8 from 3.
Yeah, so I expect Seth Curry to come out, shoot or shoot. And I think he'll give the Sixers, I almost said Eagles for a second. I think he'll give the Sixers some much-needed early offense, and he'll be a key part in taking Toronto's hearts tonight early in this game. Seth Curry is my player of the game tonight.
I like it. And I like how you pointed out he could be the key to, really getting out to a great start and kind of, putting them away early because he's the shooter, right? Like he's the guy that can shoot lights out, hit 3 threes in a row in the first half, and all of a sudden they're down an extra 9 points. So I can definitely feel a big game from Seth tonight. I would love to see that. And it's funny you mentioned the Eagles because they are the talk of the town. Let's not get it twisted. I know that we're talking Sixers NBA tonight, but the NFL is in the thick of it right now, and the Eagles are the talk of the town. I want to give them some props for their recent play. But as we look at tonight's game, I'm going to go ahead and go with Tobias Harris. I think he's going to come out in killer mode tonight. He's feeling good about my jersey arriving safe and sound. He feels like he did. He feels like he did a great deed, giving just a young boy like myself a nice Christmas present.
A young lad.
I think Tobias Harris comes away, a couple threes tonight. I'm thinking 2 threes, and maybe gets hitting the boards, hustling around a little bit to end this game early. Comes away with a double-double. I'm going to go with Tobias Harris as my player of the game, aside from Joel Embiid. I think that's something that has to be thrown in there. Yeah. Should have mentioned that first, but and I'm guessing I didn't ask you directly. I'm guessing you have the Sixers with the W tonight, as do I.
Yes.
I gotcha.
And I don't think this cannot be a tough, grinded out type of W. This cannot be the Sixers are down 11 at halftime and they come out strong in the third quarter type of W. This needs to be a convincing win from start to finish. No slow starts tonight. It's been a theme for them all year. It's been a theme for the Eagles as of late. Stop it with the slow starts. Again, this team has no business being on the same floor as you tonight with all of their firepower out. Take them out early,
100%.
take their heart early, and that's that. Sixers win. I think they win by double digits tonight.
I like it. I think they win by double digits as well. As we, move away from the Sixers talk, just briefly here, we are about to end the show. Anything you're looking at around the NBA, tonight, something new on the show I want to, kind of incorporate just to include the rest of the NBA a little bit more often because I love to talk Sixers, obviously. Any game that you're looking at tonight specifically, any matchups?
So right now is really a really hard time to be fully invested in the NBA, especially from a gambling perspective, because you click on every game and it's COVID. You even get to the game I'm going to highlight in a second, and there's still a bunch of role players and stars out in that game as well. But tonight, even if there wasn't, a bunch of COVID-ridden rosters tonight, there's not a lot of big time games on tonight. But I'll look at the late game. I'll go Denver and Golden State tonight because the Joker and Steph are both playing in this game. So at the very least, those two should be a lot of fun watching that battle. Two very different, obviously, styles. You have a top 2 center, and he's not number 1, going up against the best shooter of all time tonight. So that's where I'll go. But right now, the NBA and all, the 3 of the big professional sports leagues right now are being struck with COVID. So
bombarded with COVID, and it's just consistent every single week. You mentioned it, as far as fantasy and gambling, any type of that with any sports right now is kind of a little ridiculous. I'm with you. There's not much going on tonight. It's hard to measure each game. Like you said, a lot of stars even missing from these games. The one game I'm looking at, and it's just because the Lakers, they were the talk of the town, coming into the season, they still are. They've been struggling. Some have blamed it on Russ. Some have blamed it on the team. It's going all around. They're going against the Houston Rockets team tonight. They're 5.5-point favorites. How are you only 5.5-point favorites against the Rockets? My God. They're going against the Rockets tonight. They were coming off a terrible loss. I believe I don't know if they played last night, but I know they lost to the Brooklyn Nets recently without KD or Kyrie. They got to get back on the nod. They got to get some consistent, just like the Sixers. They got to get some consistency built there in LA, and kind of get it turned around. And you cannot afford to lose to Houston. And I know they've lost games like this already this season. Don't get me wrong, but it can't continue. You got to flip the switch at some point. So that's right. If I was looking at one game, that would be the game tonight. Honestly, I'm only going to be watching the Sixers and the Raptors, and then I'll call it a night. But hopefully we can start to see some of the stars come back, start to see these teams get to normal. It's been a little fun with some of these guys returning. Like we saw Lance Stevenson the other night, which it's just like, it's like goofy to see almost. I've seen, people hinting at, Jamal Crawford. What's he talking about? What the turn the autocorrect off or something. I don't know what's going on there. But yeah, as we look around the league, it's just been very scarce when you're seeing actually, actual superstars matching up head to head each night. But hopefully they can start to get some guys back. That is going to be it for this episode tonight. I definitely, want to do some house cleaning before we exit here, Dylan. As you all know, DSM Media and Scotty Talks NBA are brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. The Manscaped just launched their 4th-generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. You heard that right, the 4.0. Join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code SCOTTY. SCOTTY at manscaped.com. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code Scotty at manscaped.com. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. your balls will certainly thank you. I certainly thank you for tuning in tonight. If you don't already, make sure you are following myself on Twitter at Scotty Drown. Make sure you give my co-host a follow at DylanJD98 on Twitter. And then, of course, DSM Media. That's what this is all presented by. That's where all of this is coming from. Make sure you're tapped into DSM Media on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok. We got you covered on every social media platform. Find us on Twitter at DSM_media. You'll find our link tree. It has all the links in there to all our social media accounts. You can also find us on Instagram at DSM.DoSomethingMajor. And of course, make sure to check out our merch site. If you love DSM Media, if you love the content, if you want to support some of the hosts here, some of the shows, check out our merch site. Grab a few t-shirts, a few coffee mugs, whatever you like. And definitely show some support and send us pictures if you do grab some. We would love to see you in it. Yeah, we got some great stuff. Dylan's got someone over there, but we got you covered across the sports spectrum. So make sure you're checking out all of the DSM Media content. That is all I got for you tonight. Dylan, you got anything else for the listeners? Anything planned for tomorrow?
I sure do, Scott. Take us home.